It's so easy to be average. It takes a little something to be special, doesn't it? It takes a little something special to be a great player. Did you push yourself to be great today?
Yeah. The man of Scarlet and Gray. Yeah. Let's go. The man of Scarlet and Gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rockin' with hard? The man of Scarlet and Gray. Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love? The man of Scarlet and Gray. What we reading now? Who we listen to? Who we rockin' with hard? The man of Scarlet and Gray. Who we vibing with? Who we riding with? Who we clapping for love? The man of Scarlet and Gray. It's time for it. You ready for it? It's my time. You better know it. Let's go Bucks. Every time. Hating on us, you better.
Your undisputed source of all things Ohio State. This is the Men of the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Here's your hosts, Shannon Summers and Chip Minnick.
The man of Scarlet and Gray.
Buckeye Nation, welcome to another great edition of Men of Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel, bringing you all Buckeyes all the time. I'm your host, Shannon Summers, contributor and editor from menofscarletandgray.com. Allow me to introduce Chip Minnick, also contributor and editor at menofscarletandgray.com. How you doing today, Chip?
I'm doing well, Shannon, and I'm glad to hear that you did not lose your voice in Piscataway, New Jersey after a fun-filled trip out there to see Ohio State defeat the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 49-7.
Well, the most yelling I got to do was the OHIO that was going around. Checked them off the list and got to join in on the Shoot to Canaan chant, which is kind of cool. This week we're going to have a Buckeye Roundtable. We're going to discuss what we've seen from the Buckeyes, what we're looking forward to, along with any and all concerns that we might have. On today's show, we will have Derek Cross from Buckeye Brothers Podcast, Joe Dexter from the Buckeye Battle Cry, and host of some show called Script Ohio, I guess, here on Buckeye Sports Radio. Never heard of it. We are also happy to have Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone.net on. Also, we're going to go over the Rutgers game. That was a train wreck for Rutgers. We are going to have our Motsag Pick'ems. We're also going to be doing another week of Ask Motsag since you find folks sending them some questions again this week. Thank you so much. But before we get into it, we want to remind you to download the free Buckeye Sports Radios app on your iOS or Android device so you can enjoy our and other great shows on the channel wherever you go. And go follow the channel on Twitter at Buckeyes Radio.
Tonight we'll open with a special Buckeye Roundtable talk. But don't worry, folks. You won't sit there itching and burning like a sexually transmitted Wolverine.
All right, welcome to a special edition of the Buckeyes podcast here at Men of Scarlet and Gray. I'd like to welcome, first of all, Joe Dexter from the Buckeye Battle Cry and Script Ohio on Buckeye Sports Radio. How you doing today, Joe?
Good. Glad to be here. Glad to talk Buckeyes on the bye week. Don't like bye week. It means honey-do list is coming up, but hey, it's not Saturday yet.
I hear you on that. I also like to welcome Derek Cross from Buckeye Brothers Podcast. How you doing today, Derek?
I'm doing well. I love your guys' show. Thanks for having me on. I also hate the bye week, so I'm glad we get together, talk a little football.
Sounds great. Then we got the notorious Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone Net. How you doing today, Tony?
I'm good, and I love the bye week.
Today we just want to get together since it is a bye week, talk about some of the stuff that we've seen, some of the changes that we're seeing in the Buckeyes, what we're looking at going forward for the final 4 games before the possible Big Ten championship. Joe, what are you, as far as the offense, what are some of the things you're liking that's changed since we made a move to, or since they made a move to JT?
Well, I think the big thing that sticks out is just the fluidity of the offense and how things are starting to work together and evolve throughout the 2 games where he's had major playing time in his start against Rutgers, 14 for 18. You'll take that every single time. And what's great about it is the receivers are being able to be put in the positions where they excel the best. When you look at what Braxton Miller does well, the one thing he does well is make big plays in that slot. He's able to do that with JT Barrett at quarterback. It seems there's a special chemistry between Mike Thomas and JT Barrett this season for some reason, even though with the connection with Cardale Jones that he has. And he showed that on Saturday against Rutgers with his 5 receptions. And being able to use him as a possession receiver, I know he had the big plays, but if you look at that touchdown score, it was a quick hitch route that turned into an end zone score. So being able to use him as a possession receiver and really the best hands in college football, in my opinion, having JT Barrett out there really solidifies the offense when it comes to putting everybody in their role and being the distributor that the Ohio State team needs at quarterback. As funny as that sounds, this isn't basketball, but they do need a distributor at that quarterback position, and it showed how well it can work when it's clicking with JT Barrett as the starter on Saturday.
You're right. After seeing that catch against Rutgers, I'm going to go on a limb and say Miller's got some good hands, too, in order to stay with that one pass that nobody seems to be wanting to talk about. Tony, you do a lot with the team as far as being at the press conferences and seeing the players and everything. I know there's a lot of speculation before the move was made to JT. A lot of people were saying that basically Urban was, I don't know, trying to showcase Cardale or something about his NFL and all that. Do you think, from seeing firsthand, that JT actually got over his injury at the Penn State game and that's why he was able to take this team back?
You know, he said at Rutgers that he was full go in May. And, you know, he probably was, but he wasn't. I mean, we all saw him play in the games, and he wasn't the JT of last year until about Penn State. You know, once he had, you know, gotten action in a few games, because I have to assume, you know, you have to assume the reason he wasn't starting is because he wasn't as good in practice. You know, he wasn't as good as Cardale Jones. And so I think it just took him a while to become, you know, the JT that we all remembered from last year. And Urban Meyer said the same thing. And what JT, and I even talked to JT about this, I think in the spring or after the season last year, I said, you know, can the JT of 2014 start in 2015? He said, no, he has to be better than he was last year. And, you know, I think maybe that was an issue as well. He even if he was as good as he was last year, it wasn't good enough to get the nod until, you know, I would say it's still not good enough because, you know, maybe he's better than he was last year. And, you know, as long as he stays healthy, there's no telling what he can do in this offense with, you know, everything he's capable of doing.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, especially on Twitter, that think they're a college football coach that's won a national championship 3 times or doing a I told you so after the Rutgers game. Derek, what have you been impressed with or concerned on as far as the Buckeyes on the defensive side?
Well, defensively, I felt like all season long, it looked like a championship defense to me. I think the one thing that's concerned me going into the season, and definitely throughout the entire season so far, has just been defending the rush, honestly. We saw early throughout the season that they were having a hard time stopping the run up the middle, and then against Penn State, we saw that we were vulnerable on the edges too. So that's my big concern. But other than that, I just feel like across the board, Ohio State's had a championship defense for a lot of the season, really kept us in those earlier games when our offense wasn't firing on all cylinders.
Chip, you have anything for anybody you want answered?
Well, actually, just to kind of agree with a lot of the comments here, the one thing that, you know, I was, you know, Shannon, you know, that I was surprised that JT Barrett wasn't the starter. The one thing that I think, you know, kind of hasn't been said yet, but I think I would hope that our all-star panel would agree is that kind of keeping an eye on Cardale Jones. And I guess, you know, Tony, since, as Shannon said, you know, you're probably closest to the team in terms of being at the press conference. I guess, you know, how would you evaluate Cardale Jones in terms of his disposition ever since the change was made? Because he's basically only one play away from being back in that starter role.
Yeah, it's interesting because they won't bring out the backup, basically. They won't let us talk to the backups just because that's a hard line of questioning that they're going to get. And, I guess why subject, that particular quarterback to that sort of thing. But everybody's saying the right thing as far as, how Cardale's handling it. Obviously, it's not something anybody wants to have happen to them. And, same thing happened last year with Cardale. He was upset that he got bent, or that he didn't, win the job, and that JT overtook it. So it's never going to be an easy situation. But I think he had to learn the lesson last year that, just because you may not play or start the first 12, there's always those last 3, and your team's going to need you at some point, whether, there's an injury or what have you. Maybe JT Barrett gets suspended for spearing somebody or targeting somebody. Anything can happen like that, where he has to be ready. And he learned his lesson last year. So I'm assuming that he does the mental reps that everybody raved about JT Barrett doing, and he'll be ready to step in. But as we've seen, it's a different offense between the two players because they have different skill sets.
And I guess a question I have, and this is something that Derek just raised, and I've had the same concern, Derek, about the run defense, especially as we're getting into November with the opponents that are still remaining on Ohio State's schedule that are predominantly run-based offenses. And I guess it's just kind of an open question. I'm going to let Derek answer it first because he brought it up. What do you guys think is the issue with the run defense? Because the vast majority of the players are back. When you think about, now granted, Ohio State lost Michael Bennett from last year's national championship team, but the linebackers, by and large, you're talking about Darren Lee. I know he's banged up. Raekwon McMillan was, an all-star linebacker. What do you guys think? And I guess, Derek, if you want to lead it off, what do you think is the issue with the run defense? Because that has been my biggest concern so far this season defensively.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, if I could identify exactly what the problem was and give a solution, I'd probably try to be one of the coaches. But to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I mean, I think that there's a little bit of trouble on the line. I think you look at the next level with the linebackers not getting in there, not making the stops. I say that, but then my very next thought is we've had game after game where Raekwon McMillan is the top tackler on the team. He's getting 14, 15, 16 tackles. So it's just hard for me to say. I feel like it's a bunch of little problems across the board at those first 2 levels, and not really something you could zero in on any one person or position for that matter.
I think if you take away the Saquon Barkley performance that he had against Ohio State and you look at it, and I think Derek's hitting on something big here where the defensive line, as great as they've played, I think a little bit in the early parts of games and against mobile quarterbacks especially, has just been over pursuit and allowing them to get past the defensive line and into the linebacking core, and that's going to add up rushing yards total. When you look at all their games, they're giving up 3.69 yards per carry on the ground. 41 times teams are running, though, against them. So it's an obvious weakness that other teams are noticing. It's interesting to see how they'll develop and trying to improve it because it's not something that you can just diagnose right away and really figure out what the problem is. I think a lot of it has to do with injury, especially at the linebacking core, even though they are the guys making the plays. And a lot of it's just simple adjustments throughout the season that in big games where you hope that your defense can contain, that they're going to be able to do that. And we saw that down at the end of the stretch last year. Melvin Gordon was stuffed from Wisconsin. Marcus Mariota couldn't get things going for Oregon. A lot of it's game planning, developing throughout the season. And to be frank about it, I'm not concerned about it, but I think it is an issue.
Yeah, I'll jump in and agree that I think that there are fixes. And then the Indiana game was just a quarterback getting out there. They weren't prepared for that. And then same with the Maryland, that was so much quarterback rushing. And the Penn State thing with Saquon Barkley, every level of the defense got caught losing leverage. Tyquan Lewis had it a couple times. Dante Booker, he got sealed a couple of times. And you would expect that for him. He was just thrust in there, wasn't necessarily expecting to play that early. Garyon Conley got caught a couple of times. But Barkley is really, really good. So I think that's just going to happen sometimes with that guy. But, then they go to Rutgers and they hold them to half of what they normally get. I think I think Ohio State is almost okay giving up some rushing yards because that's a long way down the field, and Ohio State's putting up a bunch of points, and teams aren't going to be able to keep up with them just by running the ball. So they'll never say they're okay giving up yards, but I think they're okay giving up clock a little bit because they can just go down and march down the field on their own while the opponent is chewing up clock and taking their own time doing it. And then they get down in the red zone and they can't finish.
Another thing, just to kind of, an interesting variation on the defense is that rushman front that package where they move Joey Bosa inside to defensive tackle and they bring Sam Hubbard on at defensive end. I think that, I'm not saying that that's going to be the defensive line, but I think especially against, as I mentioned earlier with that question, some of the teams that in obvious run situations or things like that they might use that more. That's just my opinion. But the question I had, and I'm not sure if the rest of the panel saw Tony's article earlier today. One of the things that I found somewhat surprising and again, it's not a concern, but it's just out of the highly touted 25-man recruiting class, only 4 freshmen have played. And the reason why I say it's not a big concern, I truly thought more of the players would have been contributing on special teams, especially the linebackers, because thinking back to when that was usually where you would see freshmen contributing, I guess. And I'm gonna throw this one at Tony since it was your article and you were the kind of the inspiration for the question. I realized in your article you said it doesn't really make sense to burn any player's eligibility at this point. That being said, for the last several weeks, Coach Meyer's been kind of, hinting that, all right, well, KJ Hill, we're ready to go with him, or Michael Weber, he's fully recovered from his knee issue, and, all of the things on again, off again with Torrance Gibson, et cetera. Do you see the possibility of any of the true freshmen at this point possibly playing against Minnesota or against Illinois before the bigger games at the end of the season? And again, this is for all of you guys to answer.
No, I don't. Unless there's an injury, I think everything has been set. I don't think Mike Weber should play simply because there's not even enough carries for Curtis Samuel right now. Briante Dunn doesn't play until the fourth quarter, and he's supposed to be your backup. So there's not enough carries. Every carry that you give to Mike Weber, and right now you got to remember JT Barrett being in there takes 10, 12, 14 touches away from somebody else. So it's kind of amazing that he's still able to spread the ball around as much as he does, considering he's taken up, quite a few touches himself. So like Mike Weber, there's no room for him. KJ Hill, I know they really like him. He's really advanced as far as route running and stuff like that, but they're not getting the ball to Michael Thomas enough. They're not getting it to Jalen Marshall enough. There's no room for skill guys right now because they have so many players there. The tight ends are just so far behind. They might not be playing in the MAC right now. They're so far behind, and Urban Meyer's not happy about that. But defensive guys like a Justin Hilliard, could he be on, special teams? Meyer said, maybe a month or so ago that he was real close, and Nick Conner was close before he got hurt. And it's kind of surprising that they haven't, maybe played him like they did Dante Booker last year, who, played behind Joshua Perry, and he was never going to play, but he got some valuable time, and that's helped this year. So, but barring injury, I don't think they want to do that to anybody else. Burn their red shirt right now.
I think it's interesting when you look at the freshmen that were expected to step up and some of the situations they've been in. Mike Weber with the injury, and now it's obvious to redshirt him, like Tony said. Torrance Gibson battling some injury and some issues off the field that we don't quite know about. So there's one of the playmakers that you think is going to step up. Nick Conner in the spring is a guy that Urban Meyer said was going to be one of the big parts on special teams. He will redshirt too because of injury. So injury plays a lot in it this year. And I think another thing that plays a factor is there's a lot of sophomores on this team and a lot of juniors, heck, a lot of seniors that are playing under guys that are less experienced when it comes to class, and so they're getting playing time on the field because they're stepping up in practice trying to play a little bit better. I think that plays a little bit of a role in it too. It's interesting to see though, because a lot of those guys were supposed to step up and be in those roles.
Well, and everybody talked about the 2013 class. I'll just jump in real quick. How much impact the 2013 class had last year. But, the players on the team are saying, well, watch out for the 2014 class. They're just so young at this point that they don't have, they're not getting the minutes, but they're just as talented. And you're starting to see some of that, this year, which, as you said, impacts the 2015 class and how much time they can see, because there are not many spots right now to get on the field.
I think you're making a whole bunch of great points about it, but also just to be honest with you, I don't really want to see the younger guys. I don't really want to see the younger guys on the field at this point. Not for their own sake, because I am excited for them. I do think we got a lot of new shiny weapons that we're going to be pulling out of the arsenal over the next couple of years. But this year, especially on offense, I think we're a team that's been struggling to find our identity. Now with JT at the helm, I think we saw that come to play more with Rutgers. I think we started to see really who we are. We started to distribute the ball to our major weapons. And I would hate for us to lose any sort of momentum there by putting other guys in. I say, let's keep our main guys in there. Let's build on that momentum, and let's continue to establish this rapport that everybody has with each other.
I have a quick follow-up related to the freshmen, and this is just something that just kind of ran through my mind is, I mean, you can't change the past, but do you guys think because the offense, I don't want to say struggled because they're undefeated. I mean, they're 8-0 and, but it wasn't as explosive as I think any of us or most Ohio State fans or the national media was anticipating. That being said, do you think it was because of the, we'll just say lackluster wins and victories over the Northern Illinois or the Western Michigans or, Indiana, that contributed to the freshmen not being able to get on the field? Or do you think it's just that the talent, as you guys said, from those sophomore, junior, senior classes is so abundant that it's not really much, it wasn't really much of a factor?
I guess it is. It's a lot because of the talent. But it's also because we weren't super dominant. We weren't really just blowing teams out of the water, and so you could put in other guys to get them reps. I think, obviously if we had sort of played at the same sort of fire that we did last year and we were putting up 40, 50 points, you would have seen a lot more of the young guys, but we just weren't there. We really were still coming together as a team with our starters going into week 7 and week 8. So without that happening, I don't really think those guys really had the opportunities to come up as the younger guys and get on the field.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The games so early, like 5 of the first 5 games, 4 of them were still in doubt for quite a while. So there was no room to, throw guys out there just to get them some snaps like they've been able to do in the past. So when you have that many close games and you can't get guys in there, then it sort of almost sets forward how you're going to treat your freshmen, because that, when you first start once the blowouts start coming at like game 5, game 6, game 7, then you really have to start thinking, well, now is it worth it?
It's almost two different sides of the story, offensively and defensively, because there are opportunities on defense, especially with injury now, for guys that are younger to step up, like Marshawn Lattimore to fill a role, or other guys that we might not have projected as starters, or guys that have major contributions, but they have that opportunity because of injury. I think that plays a little bit into it. And offensively, there's so many guys that you can go to that have experience. And that's the big part of it, is just getting the experience of being in the program. I think is a huge thing for the offense and the defense, especially. You look at Gary and Connolly and the growth that he's made stepping in now after a year in the program. And it's things like that we see in players that really make you understand, I think, a little bit why the freshmen in the program have taken a step back at times. But then again, the great thing about being an Ohio State Buckeye is when you get the opportunity, there is a chance to excel. And there's a lot of guys that have proven at a young age and as freshmen, even this year, that they can do that.
Yeah, and even last year, they wouldn't have won the national title without their redshirt freshmen. So there's definitely value to, Darren Lee, Billy Price, Eli Apple, guys like that redshirting and seasoning for a year. And, you're seeing that with Sam Hubbard this year. And, so there's value to, not just burning red shirts just to burn them. Urban Meyer likes to say that, certain guys won't be here for 5 years, so you play them right away. He said that about Sam Hubbard, but, you get so far into the season and, it's not worth it. Like a guy like Mike Weber, I think you have to redshirt him now because for me, I assume he's going to be the starting running back next year. And so, will you get 3 seasons as a starter out of him? You might. I think they have a better chance of getting 3 seasons of him starting if they redshirt him, as opposed to playing him this year and then he starts for 2 years and leaves after his junior season. So I think there's tons of value in saving guys, even though Meyer would rather play them to get them going.
My thing is about the freshmen and stuff. You look at last year, Raekwon McMillan came in and played sparingly with Curtis Grant at linebacker. And you see him this year, and I kind of noticed at the Penn State game when there was a penalty called for taunting on Bell. When Bell had that taunting penalty, and you seen Raekwon run over to him and get up in his face. Do you think that playing last year helped with his leadership, or do you think he just has a natural leadership ability?
I think both, because he learned from Curtis Grant, who was one of the team's leaders. And, Curtis Grant went through hell at Ohio State, off the field, on the field. And so, he still considers him a big brother. And so he learned from Curtis Grant, that even though you may not have had the greatest career to this point or, ever, and this is just Raekwon's second year, I mean, you're the middle linebacker. You're the leader of the defense. So you can talk to somebody like Von Bell who, is going to be an all Big Ten, all this, all that. You're the leader of the defense. They look for him to do that. So, yeah, I mean, that's part of the job of being the middle linebacker, whether you're a sophomore or a senior.
I think what Ohio State's doing when it comes to leadership and guys like Raekwon McMillan, don't get me wrong, he's a special kid, the number 1 recruit coming in. You expect that type of thing from him, but they just keep churning the butter, man. When it comes to turning players into leaders, you look at Tyquan Lewis last year, comes in as a freshman, plays well. I think he had somewhere near 200 snaps on the defensive line. And now he steps into a role where he's not just a starter. He's becoming one of the better defensive ends in college football. It keeps churning, and that's what you look for in a championship program and what's brought to the table. It's huge, the leap from being a freshman to being either a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, depending on what your stance is in the program. I love that about this program is that your leaders can be from anywhere, and there's leaders almost at every single position.
I think that goes back to what Urban has set up with his leadership training and everything like that, and it's paying off dividends. And I think a lot of people just don't see it and don't want to recognize it or something. We talked about the defense against Rutgers. It seems like, they got held them to half what they were giving up on the ground. Do you guys think it was more of Kyle Flood going away from his game plan even early before Ohio State started pulling away, or do you think it was actually Ohio State stopping them? Because I know when I was sitting in the stands with the Rutgers season ticket holders for 3 quarters before everybody bailed out, that's what everybody was talking about, is how he went away from James and stopped with the running and was trying to throw more. What do you guys think?
I guess I would say that's totally possible. It's always going to be a factor if they go away from the game plan, but I also just have to point out that it's Rutgers. They were dominated, and Ohio State's a much better team. And not to take anything from the Taylor Knights, I mean, everybody that's come out against the Buckeyes this year is coming out gunning for us. And but I just think at the end of the day, they were just outmatched, and that's why we were able to stop them like we did.
Yeah, Rutgers, they had 2 good carries, a 25-yarder and a 19-yarder. So 44 of their 104 yards rushing came on 2 carries. The other 27 went for 60. So they were should have done pretty good. And, obviously you have to go away from the run to try to catch up. But, I don't think it would have mattered.
I think part of it simply was Leonte Carew was out of the game after the beginning of the game, and when you have Carew in and you have to respect him, plus you have Paul James running the football, you're going to be able to get a couple more cracks at it and be able to move the chains better with an athletic running back like James was. And I think once Carew exited the game, it really changed things when it came to running the football. And I think Kyle Flood might have freaked out a little bit and said, we got to make sure that we move the chains with running the football now that Carew's not out. And Laviano struggled to throw the football 50% completion percentage. So I think it's a combination of both, but I can't say that Paul James made me nervous as a fan watching him run the football when he was having success. So I don't think that's part of it, but I do think that they did step away from that game plan of running the football a bit with Paul James.
Now, before we prematurely shoot the cannon here and switch over to looking forward, what are you guys' differences in this team from last year? The personality, identity, desire, maybe? I mean, what are you guys seeing different from this year than last year?
It's a completely different animal. So it's hard to say at this point when you're into game number 9 coming up next week, because starting the year, it was completely different despite having the same players, a lot of the same players on the team. It was a complete different identity for the offense. The defense had a lot of different players in their roles. I still think this is a hungry football team. I don't buy the people that say that they're not hungry. They already won a championship. Yeah, a lot of the players in prime positions did win a championship last year, but a lot of them want to prove that they are going to win another one this year, and they want to have the success that has been built inside the program. There's a lot of pressure on that, and this is the thing. They are a different team, but in an essence, to me, I see a lot of the same characteristics from a year ago, a lot more leadership even at this point of the year, despite the struggles, and that's something you'll take heading into the final games of the season and into the playoffs, into the Big Ten championship if your team can get there. That's what I like about this team, the leadership everywhere, the young guys stepping up, the defensive backs this year where they could have taken a step back, losing one of their captains in Darren Grant, and stepping up, Duran Grant, I should say, and stepping up and really filling in. Gary and Connolly doing a great job back there. Everybody is starting to come together at the right time. Again, just like last year, again, for me, the turning point was after the Maryland and Rutgers games a year ago. So it's interesting to see the comparisons between the two. There is some differences, but I see a lot of the same too.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. One of the things I'm working on for this week or this weekend is, the people talk about complacency, but JT Barrett being inserted as the quarterback now, it's almost like a playoff push signing day trade in baseball for, the best pitcher in the majors who has never won a World Series. So, JT Barrett, he won a national championship last year, but he wasn't part of it, on the field. So there will be no complacency with him. And he's one of the teams, he's one of the main leaders on the team. So there's no doubt that he wants to experience on the field what everybody else, what all of his teammates experienced on the field last year. So I don't expect any complacency moving forward because the guy in charge didn't get to experience that last year, and he definitely wants it.
Yeah, I feel like I would totally agree with that. I feel like, one of the big differences between getting caught up in complacency and just sort of not congealing is last year they were building their identity. This year they needed to redefine it. But what they were up against really early through the season were expectations. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but I can certainly speak for myself and say that I had expectations that were unfair. And that's not probably the best motivator. But as they've moved through the season and some of the naysayers have come out and they've complained about the schedule, or they've complained about it's not a championship team and Cardale is this and JT is that. Now all of a sudden, Ohio State is starting to hear that, and it's starting to really fuel their fire. And I think that's really going to be the biggest motivator of all time. I mean, then you throw in JT on top of it, and I think his leadership, his abilities just will complete the drive.
Yeah, I think you guys are definitely right. I think the sleeping giant Buckeye, if you want to call it that, is awoken, and I think the rest of the NCAA, all of a sudden, after a Rutgers game, their eyes opened up, and I think they're going to be a little scared. Now, the burning question, and that's not posted on bathrooms, but it's just among all Buckeye fans here. What do you see going forward with the Minnesota Illinois, Michigan State, and the sexually transmitted diseases in the outhouse?
Well, I certainly expect to win out. I certainly expect a big fight from that school up north and from the Spartans, of course. I think the Spartans will probably be a little bit less of a fight than we were expecting coming into this season, but I don't want to speak too soon. I certainly don't want to jinx us. But ultimately, I think that we finish this season, I think we're going to have a very rallied and confident team from here on out. I think that the wheel being handed over to JT is sure to move our offense efficiently and successfully. I think that's just going to fuel the fire in each one of our incredible athletes. I think that success that they'll have now under this sort of new regime, if you will, is just going to bring back that swagger that we've been missing a little bit this season. I think defensively we're going to button things up. I think we're going to be able to stop the run a little bit better. I think we're really going to find our groove now and move forward. So ultimately, I just expect this team to be firing on all cylinders from here on out. I think we've ironed out a lot of the wrinkles. I think a lot of wrinkles were made because of the changes too, by the way. It should be mentioned that with changes with coaching, I think Ed Warner making a move, I hate to say it, it may have caused a little bit of a dip with our offensive line production. I think figuring out who's going to call the plays, is Ken Beck going to be upstairs, who's going to be downstairs, who's doing what. I think all that's been resolved now. And moving forward, I really just think that all the pieces have come together and we should be pretty dominant moving right through the rest of the season.
I think the beautiful thing when you look at the grand picture, when you're talking about those issues that Derek touched on, and you look at most professional programs or you look at most collegiate programs, I'm a Lions fan. When they had issue with offensive play calling and they had issues deciding who goes to the box, who does this, who does that, they're fighting to win 2 games, and now they have an offensive coordinator named Jim Bob Cooter. So this is the beauty of Ohio State and the transitions that they can make throughout this season. It talks so much about this coaching staff and the athletes that they've recruited to play there and the ability that they can continue to transform themselves throughout a season. Looking ahead at Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan, it's interesting to see what this team will do. And I think they have to be the favorites in a lot of those games, if not all of them. And I think that JT Barrett is going to make an argument to be the Big Ten Player of the Year just by his influence on this team and the way that the media looks at it through that spectrum. The fact that once he entered the game for them full time is where they really turn things around. I don't know if I necessarily agree that Ezekiel Elliott shouldn't be that player, but I think when you have the weapons that you do and you play against the schedule that is in front of them, and that it's no spite to the teams that they play, but they should be favored in those games. And from here on out, I see them continuing to roll and continuing to improve in the little things that they need to get better on offense and defense to be that championship caliber team.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I think they'll be favored the rest of the 4 games. But I always just see this. The Michigan game is unpredictable because, since Urban Meyer has been at Ohio State, the Buckeyes have had much better teams, much better talent than the Wolverines, and it really hasn't mattered. Well, it's mattered because they've won, but the games are closer than they probably should be. And this game at Michigan is going to be, everything that you would. I believe it'll be everything that you expect it to be. Just physical, close, probably pretty ugly at times. But what Ohio State does, what they can do on offense is what Michigan has trouble with. They can run the ball, they can spread a defense out, and then you've got the equalizer of JT Barrett running the ball himself. And, they aren't the fastest at linebacker. They're susceptible downfield, a little bit with their safeties. They've got really good corners. But what Ohio State does, it stresses all defenses, even Michigan's. We saw Connor Cook throw it around on them, but they had Aaron Burbridge is a fantastic receiver. So, the Buckeyes have fantastic receivers, and they have more than one, as opposed to Michigan State. So, I think they'll be fine. Going to Illinois though, the weather's always terrible. It's always a weird game. You never know what you're going to get, but that Illinois is terrible. So they have to beat the weather more than they have to beat the Illini, I think.
Chip, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I think all of us probably remember how Coach Tressel used to say, September and October were for pretenders and November is for contenders. And the schedule sets up, it has always been, even at the onset of the season, November was always going to be the most challenging aspect for Ohio State's schedule. I think Minnesota has been a disappointment in the sense that I thought they were going to be much better than they are. Tony just, I think he nailed it when he said going to Illinois is always dicey just because of the weather and the wind and the way that schedule, the stadium is laid out. Michigan State's going to be tough, but not, I don't think as tough as we thought. And let's face it, the Wolverines, there's not a question on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, that was something that going into the season, people, when they would ask me, how's Harbaugh going to win with that team? It's okay. Well, they've got a good defense and he's going to try and run the ball. And lo and behold, that's basically how they've gotten off to a decent start. And I agree completely with what Tony said that, both, the last time that Ohio State was up there, it came down, to the final play. All 3 years, basically, it's been a tough game. The fact that it's going to be Michigan State and then going up to Ann Arbor and then hopefully potentially a ranked team in the Big Ten championship. It's going to be a tough, physical, grueling conclusion to the regular season in 2015.
I'll add one more thing, one more X factor to me, and it's always at this time of the year, is coaching October and November. Urban Meyer's 26-0 at Ohio State, and that's a big advantage that people don't give Urban Meyer enough respect for, is he wins the big games.
Not that either, not just that, I'm sorry, but injuries. Injuries are starting to, play key in a lot of teams. I know I've been all of a sudden, for some reason, getting a lot of Michigan fans coming up and talking smack, and there's no way that Ohio State's going to get 120 yards on the ground against them when we play them. Please be healthy, because I guarantee it's going to be more than 120, and I'm not talking about just 121. So basically, since I have my Big Ten championship tickets reserved, I should go ahead and put my money aside then, from what you guys are saying?
I don't know, that Iowa squad. Iowa.
Yeah, you got to watch out for the Kirk Ferentz. I can't believe you said that.
Big Ten Coach of the Year right there.
He's going to win it, too. That's the sad thing.
Yeah.
That was actually one of our Ask Motzag questions. I mean, we may as well, one of our loyal audience listeners, they said, do you think Harbaugh is going to win Big Ten Coach of the Year? What do you guys think? I guess, Tony, what do you think? It's destined.
If Iowa goes to the Big Ten championship game, it's going to be Kirk Ferentz. But the real question is, what happens if Michigan and Iowa meet in the Big Ten championship game? Then what? Then worlds colliding between the two guys who would be expected to win it. I wonder, is Michigan State now at a place where Mark D'Antonio can't win it no matter what he does? Like, whatever, like any Ohio State head coach, they can't win it no matter what they do because the expectations are already there. Is that a sign that Mark D'Antonio has got Michigan State, to that level where he's expected to be great?
That's definitely a good question. I never understood why, after Urban came in his first year and went undefeated, he couldn't get Coach of the Year. But hey, whatever.
I'm voting for Bill Cuban.
You are listening to the Men in Scarlet and Gray here on Buckeye Sports Radio.
One's a riverboat gambler, picking with his gun. The other is cold, calculating, which makes Vegas nervous. Now it's time for Motzag's Pick'em. Who are you going to ride with?
This week I didn't lose any games to Chip, so we're on the right track. All right, our first game, we've got the Maize and Blue STDs versus the Minnesota Ice Cream Eaters on the sideline.
That is an 8:00 kickoff. That one I do know. because the freaks come out at night, and it is Halloween.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, I just wish it's going to be snowing over there, so that way they get to experience what we had to experience, what Ohio State had to experience last year. I'll go ahead and, Tony, you go ahead and I'll let you pick first.
I expect Michigan's defense to get back to what they were doing, and I think they're favored by 14, so I could see like a 24-0, 24-7 type of win. I'll take Michigan in that one.
Don't need another shutout. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I'd agree with Tony. I think Michigan coming off of a bye week, I think they're still angry over the greatest punt I've ever seen in my life. And Minnesota not turning out to be quite what we thought they might be coming into the season. I think the Skunks will win it.
Joe?
Well, the Michigan running game, stopping the running game for Michigan has been pretty solid. 2 freshman running backs for Minnesota, Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks. 2.14 yards per carry given up for Michigan's defense. So I'm transmitting the disease, folks.
Chip, you're not spreading the burn, are you?
I wish. Let me just say, I think the Wolverines, they get to reclaim the little brown jug, and I'm sure they're going to try and reclaim that yellow sweatshirt that's been draped around that pumpkin that is going all over the internet too. That is phenomenal. I want one of us to get that kid, whoever that kid is. They're making a fortune off that kid with the pumpkin and that T-shirt down in Cincinnati. I don't know what that kid's name is, but I'm serious. I want to check on his mental health to see how he's doing.
He's probably more upset now that he's not cashing in on his own image.
I'm sure.
The greatest thing I ever seen was him on that scoreboard right before Penn State started. It was awesome. Yeah, even though Minnesota's coming off a bye also, I don't see them having any kind of offensive firepower. That was the one thing. I know we talked preseason that we were kind of concerned if they had anybody to replace what they lost last year. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to test positive on this also with the Wolverines. All right, the next one we got.
You've got full-blown Wolverines.
There you go. And it burns. All right, we got Illinois at Penn State. Derek, we'll let you go first this time.
I think Penn State's got this one in the bag, honestly. The game's at home, and, it's Illinois. Penn State's a better team all in all, so I'm sure they take the W on this one.
Joe?
I think the hack attack is back. Now, the big thing for me in this one, I think Illinois is going to keep it closer. They're 27% defensively on third down conversions, and a lot of the problem for Penn State is getting the ball moving in the first and second downs of drives. But last week, all the big touchdowns for hack attack was in the first down, second down territory and big plays. So I'm sticking with Penn State.
Tony?
Yeah, I'm surprised the line is only 5.5 on this for Penn State. I would expect more. I think it's interesting. Illinois doesn't give up a lot of sacks. Penn State gets a lot of sacks. So they'll probably be chasing West Lunt all over the place. I can't see anybody but Penn State winning this game just because I'm a sucker for home teams, and I think they'll win by 10 or so, 10 or 13.
Chip?
I'm going to go with Illinois as well for a lot of the same reasons that Joe just mentioned. I think, it's at home. I think Penn State defensively, even though Ohio State was able to untracked a couple weeks ago, I think Illinois, they're starting to kind of teeter, and I think Penn State's going to be able to do this one with minimal effort at home.
Okay, so you're taking Penn State or Illinois because you said you're taking Illinois.
No, I'm taking Penn State.
All right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to go against Jeremiah here and his love for Illinois. Oh, no, that was just for Beckman. That's right. I don't see that Illinois is going to be able to stop the running game or keep Hackenberg from throwing all over the field in this one. He's going to make Hackenberg look like an NFL QB, I think. All right, our next one.
By the way, you were asking earlier about the times. That's a 12 o'clock kick at Penn State on ESPN2.
Well, I know you got we're going to be coming up to that game here in a second. Next one we have Nebraska Nice Guys versus the Purdue Bottom Feeders. Joe?
I think Nebraska ball wins on a layup over A.J. Hammond.
The NCAA is giving them a go ahead on this one. You're saying?
Yeah. Just give it to Nebraska ball.
Tony.
With the heartbreaking losses that Nebraska has had this year, if they lose this one, then you got to get rid of Mike Riley because he's been cursed by a gypsy woman. So you can't lose to Purdue and all of their other losses and keep your job, in my opinion. So I expect him to win. I expect him to overcome whatever gypsy curse he has. And I don't think it'll be pretty because it's hard to be pretty playing at Purdue. But yeah, I think the Huskers win this one.
What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I got to go with the Cornhuskers as well. I mean, they've been a pretty amazing disappointment all year long, but they're still better than Purdue. And to Tony's point, I just think, emotionally, Nebraska really needs a win. So if that doesn't do it for them, I'm not really sure what will. But, yeah, I think Nebraska will win this one.
Chip.
Never let it be said that I want someone to be cursed with a gypsy curse, especially on Halloween. So I think Mike Riley gets off the schneid at Purdue at 12 o'clock on ESPNU.
I really want to see Purdue win this game, but I don't see it happening. I think Nebraska's going to come out and, like you said, win ugly.
You guys think this is Darrell Hazel's last year?
Yeah, I think this might be his last game. I mean, he's only won 5 games.
And it's sad, too.
I hope not. I personally, just because I think if this is just my opinion, I think Purdue is such a difficult place to win. I understand, Joe, that he's only won 5 games. I just think if they let him go, I can't see how Purdue can possibly think that they're going to get a quality coach to come in there and do much better. I just think they need to be patient with them, patient with Hazel, the same way that Indiana's been patient with Kevin Wilson. But that's just my opinion.
Randy Edsel is available.
So is Tim Beckman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That one was for you, Jeremiah. I hope if you're listening.
Maybe you can put all these fired coaches together and create a Voltron of suck.
Hey, you never know. Maybe we could get Burt back here in the Big Ten. All right, let's our final Big Ten one. The third quarter leavers against the Badgers who lost their center. We're going to go ahead and go with Tony on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to take the home team again here. Wisconsin. I have nothing really further to say about this game because there's no reason to. Rutgers can't win, right? That's just how I feel. Badgers need this one at home to stay, close to Iowa. So, even though this doesn't look like an interesting game, it's still important to the Badgers. Rutgers season, Kyle Flood's probably fighting for his job as well. So maybe he's into this one, but that's about it.
Derek?
Yeah, I would disagree with all of that. I think Wisconsin's going to probably have this one handedly.
Joe?
I got a message for Ohio State fans in this game. Now, if you have an issue with the quarterback system and you think somebody's not playing well, blah, 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 just remember this.
We're not Rutgers.
You're not happy that Joel Stave is starting instead of Bart Houston. Just remember that. Wisconsin rules.
What about you, Chip?
I'm going to say Wisconsin wins, and I'm going to nominate Kurt Flood as the head for the Voltron of Suckitude that we just were creating.
Yeah, I'm going to go with whiskey, too. After watching that Ohio State game, I'm sorry, but it doesn't look like Rutgers has any heart with that team. I don't know if they were playing better beforehand, before Flood came back to the sideline or what, but I just didn't see any heart on that sideline, and I don't think the fans did either, and that was really embarrassing watching them walk out after the first drive in the third quarter and just leave out in droves. But on the positive side, all the Ohio State fans that were in the upper deck got to come down closer to the field and watch the game.
All I can say is it was a minor disappointment not to see you come down and commandeer that cannon from the stands. That's all I can say.
We were trying. All right. The main game, the one where I guess College Game Day is going to be at in Pennsylvania, it's going to be the Golden Domers against the best team in Pennsylvania. Temple. Derek, who are you going to go with?
Oh, sorry. I still would love to see the Owls hand Notre Dame another loss, but I think the Domers walk away with a win in this one.
What about you, Joe?
Temple has a 44% win probability on a.
If it's a simple fact that they could either, at the end of the season, when they play Stanford, lose, and the Pac-12 knock out a Big 12 team or a SEC team, I'm going to go with Notre Dame on this one. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming on the show, taking part of our Buckeye podcast or Roundtable podcast for our bye week. Tony, you want any plugs or anything you want to give out before we take off here?
Just read theozone.net. I would appreciate it.
It's definitely got good stuff over there, and you should follow him on Twitter too, because he always puts kind of crazy stuff out there. It's funny. Derek, how about yourself?
Probably just also listen to our podcast, the Buckeye Brothers podcast. You can find us on Podbean or iTunes and on Facebook.
Yeah, they've got a really good show you guys should check out. Mr. Joe Dexter, we got a half hour left for you to go ahead and plug your stuff.
Well, I just want to thank the nation. I'd like to thank. You can find our show on V-Sporto's Buckeye Sports Radio Monday through Friday, Script, Ohio, with my partner Claire Crawford. And I just want to shout out to the fans of the Motsag podcast, because there's a lot of great listeners out there, and I always hear from you on Twitter, and it's cool to be able to be on the show. And also, love you guys here on the board. Follow all your guys' work and all the stuff you do. So just keep it up, and it was a blast being here.
Well, like Chip was saying, it was great having an all-star cast today, and I appreciate you guys coming on the show and taking time out and be with us and discuss what we all love to talk about in Ohio State. Do you have anything left, Chip? Just,
again, thank you all for being on here. It truly was an enjoyable conversation, and sorry I'm making the dog bark in the background, but in all seriousness, enjoy and respect everyone's work. If this is more for the listeners of our podcast, if you aren't listening to these other gentlemen, their podcasts or reading their work, you're missing out, because there's a lot of tremendous insight from every one of them. So thank you all for everything you contributed to the podcast today. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thanks for the check in 2 days. I thank you.
It'll come from Shannon, maybe via the cannon blast.
There you go. Shoot the cannon. I finally got to watch that last few minutes of the game. I found it on YouTube, and Herbie and Fowler laughing at the Cannon guys and the way they were acting. Oh, that was hilarious. That was priceless. But
I was about 30 feet away from that last cannon blast on the field, and
oh no,
that caught me off guard. Believe me.
Oh no.
Yeah, I saw it coming because we were up above it a little bit. But the one thing that got me was that stupid train. The train sound over the loudspeaker. What the heck was that? You're a freaking Scarlet Knight. You're not a train. I'm sitting there I was messing with all the fans there, and I'm like, what has it got to do with the train? They're like, oh, they're just trying to get fans in and let them know the game started. I was like, really? So later on, when everybody started leaving, I was like, oh, I just figured out what that train sound is. And somebody just looked at me and they're like, what? I said, oh, it's a Buckeye train running your over.
So now we have to figure out what is more annoying, the cannon, the train, or the Nittany Lion roaring in the background at Beaver Stadium.
Oh, Nittany Lion roaring.
Nittany Lion.
Without a doubt.
Nobody ever chants Roar the Lion.
Yeah. You are listening to the Men in the Scarlet and Gray here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V-Sporto channel.
After further review.
Second and 11. Ohio State from their own 45-yard line. Barrett out of the shotgun feeds Elliott, who goes spilling straight ahead past the 50 to the Rutgers.
Let's go back and talk about the Buckeye train that ran through High Point Solutions Stadium, silencing the cannon.
Down run Elliott, his second scoring scamper of the night, and it is 48-0 Ohio State.
Okay, let's go back to the Rutgers game and talk about what the train wreck that what was for the Scarlet Knights. I'll let you go ahead and start it off, Chip.
Well, it didn't start off well from an Ohio State defensive perspective. From a television viewing audience, it was somewhat disconcerting to see Rutgers. I don't want to say they drove down the field with little effort, but when they missed that field goal, it was kind of, okay, let's kind of, get going here. And then, Ohio State with JT Barrett, they moved down and ultimately they had to turn the ball over, due to a Barrett fumble. But I think what the reason why I'm kind of stammering on this one, I think what was finally evident was the pilot behind, like the controls of the ship. It just seemed like the Ohio State offense for the first time all season was finally firing on all cylinders. That was probably the one thing that is not that I'm not taking shots at Cardale Jones. I just think that JT Barrett, it's just, you can just see that he has a command of the offense and is getting more people involved in the offense. And JT Barrett's mobility just opens up so much more for the offense that wasn't there in the games that preceded it so far this season.
I agree totally. It was weird because I know last week got to go to the Penn State game. This week drove all the way up to the birthplace of college football, interacted with the fans tailgating and stuff, met a lot of people and had a great time. Even got to enjoy the Fat Darryl, which if you go up there, you got to do what Rutgers fans do, and you have to experience the Fat Darryl. It seemed like, a big party atmosphere and everything. Game goes to start, part of the crowd's not there, whatever. But defensively, you were kind of concerned at first with that first drive, like Rutgers had a little something more into the tank and they were moving the ball a little bit. Buckeyes get the ball back, and like you said, they had that fumble. And then all of a sudden, it's just like everything started to come together. Moving down the field, great catch by Braxton Miller. I don't understand why nobody's sitting here talking about that catch that he had, because you had to have so much concentration in order to follow that ball after it came through your hands, went off your knees, bounced into the Rutgers defender, bounced back, and is bouncing all over the place, and you're still able to get it, hold it, and the ball not touch the ground. I don't know about your thoughts on that, but I thought it was a great catch.
Oh, it was definitely an exercise in concentration. By and large, his athleticism has been evident throughout this entire season. Case in point, everyone can, without me even mentioning the opponent, all I have to do is, say the words Braxton Miller, spin move, and you can picture what I'm talking about if you're an Ohio State fan. So I think that Rutgers reception is going to go down. That's going to be, I may be mistaken, but I seem to recall someone on Twitter saying that play by Braxton Miller is going to be on his highlight reel come next spring when his name is called during the NFL draft. It was that impressive of that concentration of being able to, as you said, it went through his hands, but then, fortunate or not, the fact that he had that Rutgers defender to, bounce the ball off of kind of a thing and still come down with the catch was tremendous.
Yeah, I took a lot of things away from the game. Like you said, having JT in there under center, he was fooling everybody in the crowd. I don't know about the camera because I didn't get to watch the game, but the option and everything, he's definitely the better choice. I know we were talking about Cardale before and going back and forth. You know what? What's in the past is in the past. JT has emerged. This is not the same JT that was here earlier in the season. So I don't want listeners and fans to sit there and say he should have been playing and starting since game one. Obviously, this is not the same JT since the beginning of the season. JT has stepped up at the Penn State game. He asserted himself. He earned the right to start, and he's taken off with the team. He looked great. Team looked great. Defense is starting to come around. I know they're probably a little bit more fired up as far as, what's the word I'm looking for here? goals or something, it's because going into a bye week, how many days can they get off, blah, 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 whatever, in the case and scenario of that. I just think going forward that everything is starting to come together at the right time like it's supposed to be. We were talking before, peaking and all this and all that. You look at, say, we still don't know the rest of the season, but you look at the team up north before with their 3 shutouts and everybody's puffing out their chest. In my opinion, they're peaking too soon. Everybody's sitting there saying Ohio State didn't look like, a national championship contender. They don't look like they belong. Well, guess what? The pieces are starting to come together. The wheels on the bus are back on, and it's about ready to come down the road and just run everybody over. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
No, I agree. I think the momentum for Ohio State is definitely it's trending in the right direction. It's hard to complain about a team that was 7-0 going into the game at Rutgers last weekend. So now they're 8-0, but you could just see the last 2 weeks, the momentum, as you just said, it's in a positive. They're building at the right time. They're not peaking yet. And I think maybe I'm in the minority here. But I think the bye week comes at a perfect time because Ohio State, just like every other college football team out there, there are assortments of injuries. Ohio State has been fortunate in the extent that most of the injuries, have not been season ending. But you've got, Joshua Perry has a high ankle sprain. Darren Lee has been battling a leg injury for most of the season. I'm sure offensively, Ezekiel Elliott is probably eager to have a week off because he's a marked man, in terms of, as Zeke goes, so goes the Ohio State offense. And I just think, like you said, they're not peaking too soon. I think considering all season long, we've been talking about November is going to be the most challenging part of the season. This bye week is perfectly timed, and it's going to be tremendous for Ohio State to enter November with a lot of positive momentum off of this win over the Rutgers Scarlet Knights.
Exactly. One of the things that shocked me the most, and this is why you can't have nice things, Rutgers. You do not get up and leave, I don't care what the score is, and exit in massive droves after the first drive in the third quarter. I understand. They probably had no chance in reality. But how many recruits did you have there that you're hoping to get, and you just showed them that you're going to turn your back on them? There's no way these kids are going to commit. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you were there. I don't want to pass judgment on something I couldn't really see, from a television viewing perspective. I mean, the cameras are focused on the action on the field, with the exception being of the gentlemen in their nice, in their nice, John Adams-esque attire as they were getting ready to fire the cannon. I'm just like, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't come down and do it yourself, but that's a story for another time, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, it's no fun to be on the losing end, but yeah, Rutgers, there's so much talent within the state of New Jersey and we talked about this last week on the podcast, that if they could keep, it's impossible to keep all of the talent. I mean, Ohio has so much talent that other Big Ten teams are coming in. It's important to keep the right players in that you want. But if Rutgers, if they want to become a year in, year out contender in the Big Ten, you need to have that talent within the state of New Jersey that's at your disposal being there. And if you saw the fans leaving in droves after, before the third quarter was done, what does that say about the commitment to building a consistent winner at Rutgers?
Exactly. It's funny because before the game, some of the fans I talked to, one of the actually met up with Chuck that used to run the Buckeye Battle Cry. We hung up for a little bit, and we went to one of the tailgates his father was doing with one of his classmates. And we talked to his father and his classmates, and we actually found out the story of the cannon and how it became in a rivalry with Princeton, and how their cannon is cement, encased in cement now. And it was pretty interesting stuff. I just still haven't figured out the whole train whistle thing. It's still mind-boggling. But it was nice. It was nice to see, as far as the atmosphere, the electric energy that was going on down there. Being at the birthplace of college football, it was a unique experience. I definitely, if I was anybody, take the time to go ahead and check it out. It's worth it, except for don't drive from Ohio through PA.
How long of a drive is that, just for future reference for our listeners?
It was over 7 hours, 7 to 8 hours. And I think driving through PA might have been about 5 of those.
That sounds about right. I mean,
it was PA. I mean, it's just, and all you see is trees and hills. It's just, and dead deer in the road.
Well, you could have had a snack.
Oh yeah. Well, it was funny because I mentioned when we got to Jersey, I says, you know what? I says, I guarantee the Buckeyes are gonna just smash Rutgers. And I was asked why. Well, I didn't see a buck laying on the side of the road.
That's weak.
It's time now for Ask Matsag. What's your question?
Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Can I kick it? Can I kick it?
All right, now time for our Ask Matsag segment. Answering our awesome questions from our awesome listeners. You can reach us and ask us questions at hashtag AskMatsag on Twitter. Probably the best thing to go ahead and do. So we'll go and start with our first one from a newcomer to the show as far as questions. Ron, now that Cardell isn't starting, still think he's a talented quarterback, but do you think he is relying on his strong arm too much? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if he's relying too much on his strong arm too much. I think it's just a matter of he's just the square peg in the round hole of. And what I mean by that is the offense just flows so much better with JT Barrett. It's not, arm strength not being the issue. I just think his skill set overall just does not fit with what Urban Meyer wants to do. So I think, quite frankly, I think Cardell has a bright future at the next level if he goes to the right team and the right organization that's patient with him and lets him sit and learn from a veteran NFL quarterback.
So no Browns then.
I would say that would be the worst possible destination. I mean that sincerely.
So do I. I mean, yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I just think, it would, the fans would be unrealistic. Obviously, I don't want to speculate that he's going to the NFL until he actually does. I mean, that's just the strong inclination is that he's going to do so. But to answer Ron's question, I don't think it's an issue of him over relying on his arm. I just think he does his skill set just doesn't fit the offense as well as JT's does.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of things too, if you noticed, a lot of the passes, they're little dink and dunks. They're not anything downfield or anything. I know a lot of the Rucker fans I was talking to, they're like, man, we really wish Cardell Jones would have started. I just looked at him, I was like, seriously? And they're like, what? He says, have you seen your secondary? You guys are injured. You're playing third stringers. I think this would actually have been a good game if Cardell was ready from the get-go to take over. Want to go ahead and read our next one from Beth?
Yes. The question is, if Ohio State wins out, is this the year Urban Meyer wins Coach of the Year? What are your thoughts? Because I have some definite ideas on that.
Yeah, my thoughts on it are, you said OSU and Coach of the Year. They don't go hand in hand. So that's just that's as far as I'm going to go with that one.
Well, my quick answer is, unfortunately, I think there is such a bias within the media that people believe that Ohio State has, which in certain respects is true, has so much talent that anyone could win. Therefore, they're not worthy of being coach of the year. So unfortunately, I think I don't necessarily agree with that statement, by the way, because anyone who remembers the 90s can tell you that there was an abundance of talent, and that didn't necessarily always translate into dominating victories, especially when they were needed the most at the end of the season. My point being, I think Urban Meyer is held in high esteem by everyone except the media that vote upon this award. Considering it's been since 1979 when Coach Bruce won it in his first season as Ohio State's head coach, it's a travesty and a joke that coaches such as John Cooper and Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer have not even come close to winning it. So I think it's a joke.
Yeah, I agree. I don't understand. If there was any time that there was a coach that should have been able to win, it was when Urban Meyer came in his first year after what happened and a lot of the defection, and he not really had to totally rebuild a team, but you didn't have as much talent on the team then as a lot of other coaches and stuff. And he came in and went undefeated, and that didn't get recognized, and that was kind of a slap in the face. So I don't see for any reason, if he didn't win Coach of the Year last year with the situation with the quarterbacks, it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
This is a question from our loyal listener, Gio, and Gio's statement and then question is, in his estimation, it's very likely that Jim Harbaugh wins Big Ten Coach of the Year, even if that team up north loses to Ohio State. How sick will that make us feel? My personal belief is, yes, Jim Harbaugh is certainly in the running for winning Big Ten Coach of the Year, even if that team up north loses to Ohio State. As far as how sick would that make me feel, I'd be disappointed, but my disappointment would be quickly washed away in the fact that that team up north had been defeated for the fourth time in Coach Meyer's tenure. So I would get over it pretty quickly.
As we said earlier, it's going to be between Mr. Khaki Pants and Mr. Ferentz as far as Coach of the Year. If Iowa makes it into the championship game, I think that he's going to be the shoe-in for Coach of the Year. Will Harbaugh get it still? I don't know, but to me, it wouldn't make me sick at all based on the simple fact of, like you said, as long as we beat the team up north, and a simple fact of, at the end of the year, the crystal ball, the trophy, all that are coming back to the horseshoe for another celebration in January. I'm over the whole fact of Coach of the Year and who cares. It's just the hardware at the end of the season signifying another national championship. I'd rather take that than a Coach of the Year.
Gio sent us another question. This will conclude our Ask Montsag portion, and that is, can JT win the Big Ten Player of the Year again if he has a big November? I think it's possible, but I think the reality is that Ezekiel Elliott, in my estimation, would be the odds-on favorite to win Big Ten Player of the Year, but maybe you have a different opinion.
No, I think there is a possibility. Anything's possible. I don't know. Would he have enough gameplay in order to be up there in order to get it? I think out of anybody right now, it could be Elliott. Now, should he, knock Elliott off in order to be, getting Player of the Year? I don't think it'd be right to Elliott, but who knows? Who knows how these people vote and what they think? Well, folks, that's going to bring the show to an end. Sad when we have to end our shows here on Men of Scarlet and Gray. I want to thank Tony Gerdeman of the Ozone Net. You can follow Tony on Twitter at GerdOzone. Also want to thank Derek Cross from Buckeye Brothers Podcast, which it's available on iTunes and at buckeyebrothers.podbean.com. You can follow them on Twitter at Buckeye Brothers. Our friend Joe Dexter from the Buckeye Battle Cry. You can hear his show with Claire Crawford on Script, Ohio, here on Buckeye Sports Radio. You can follow him at Buckeye Radio on Twitter. Chip, where can they find your stuff at?
Well, they can find me on Twitter at Chip Minnick, MINNICH, on menofthescarletandgray.com, as well as athlonsports.com, and my personal blog from themindofminnick.blogspot.com. And another thank you to our all-star cast. It is tremendous being able to hear some of their respective insights. We all obviously enjoy talking about Ohio State football. It was just a tremendous thing to be able to have Tony and Joe and Derek on along with us to talk about the remainder of the Ohio State season for 2015.
Totally. I think it was really a great show. I had a lot of fun doing it. You can find my stuff on menofthescarletandgray.com. Follow me on Twitter at SMSOMMARS84. You can follow the show on Twitter, Motseg Podcast, and also like us on Facebook. You could find our show on anywhere, basically. iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. We're on Podbean now. We're Spreaker. I think I said YouTube. We are now officially on TuneIn, working on the Google part of it, and iHeartRadio. I'm waiting back for word on that. So, and of course, last but not least, our channel here, Buckeye Sports Radio. Don't forget to follow them on Twitter at Buckeyes Radio. For Chip Minnick, I am Shannon Summers. Thank you for listening to Men in the Scarlet and Gray podcast here on Buckeye Sports Radio, a V Sporto channel. Talk to you all next week.